Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today, once again, it's a Thursday. I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason. How are you, JP? Plenty to discuss this week.
Well, certainly do, yeah. I was nearly calling off, actually. I didn't know if I'd be able to do this today because I've got to B1 it straight after this, but with just enough time.
You are a busy man. I mean, you've broadcasted from, I think, at least 3 different countries, maybe more, on the Acsom bulletin. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, I think I do one from Malta. I did one from Malta, one from Seville. Obviously, Scotland.
The dedication is super.
Well, I'm not going anywhere sunny today. I'm going to Straven. So if anybody knows Straven well, I don't know it that well at all, to be honest.
I have never been.
I think
that's for the Twilight Sad, right?
They're playing a gig tonight. So I've been there once in my life, I think, and it was about 23 years ago for a wedding.
Right.
And it might have even been in this place that we're playing tonight. I don't know.
It might start looking familiar. You know that deja vu thing you get when you're back in a place you've not been for a while. See, the thing talking about Twilight Sad, I actually think that was the best gig I was at in 2022, JP.
What was that? Because you were there from the sort of start of it all and saw the whole show getting built and everything?
Possibly that, a bit of that. But I mean, you've seen them. I remember you saying on the night you'd seen them a ridiculous amount of times because of your involvement with the band. But maybe in time, and you can tell me otherwise, maybe that impact, because it was the first time of me seeing them live, you know, that wall of sound, and the fact that they obviously had, was it 14 speakers all around the venue or something like that as well. So it was powerful, JP. It was powerful.
Well, a little less powerful tonight because it's just James and Andy playing, so there's no need for quadraphonic speakers or multiple amps or anything like that. So it'll be nice to play. I guess there'll be people there that I know and have known for a long time that come and see the band. So see them, and
stripped back, unplugged.
Yeah.
I used to love the MTV Unplugged back in the day, back in the 90s and beyond.
They were a reason to have Sky TV and MTV. I can't tell you the last time I watched MTV, to be honest. I did like MTV2 as well. That was good.
I did enjoy that. Listen, I'm going to ask you about more important matters. That jersey over your shoulder, that is an absolute classic, right? And that was a season, 125th anniversary, where all 3 kits were absolutely stunning. So you had the white kit, you had the home jersey, but the sponsor was white on white. So it was a bit like that, actually. The Tenants is under the crest. And the third kit would have been the black one with the tricolour around the cuffs. Am I right?
Yeah,
season.
Foolishly got the long sleeve version of that, which I always regret because the short sleeve one's the one you want to have. But I've still got the long sleeve one. But that actual top was the last top that my dad got me before he passed away. So it's very special for obvious reasons. And yeah, he bought me my first top in '88. So that's the last one that he got me. But I cherish that massively.
Absolutely, and so you should, by the way, JP. I'm going to ask you a question about the jerseys before we get into the nitty-gritty of Celtic progressing in the Scottish Cup. Players coming, players going, and a wee look ahead to Dundee United at the weekend as well. But you're talking about jerseys that your old fella buys you. I think back, was your first jersey the centenary one? I think you've already mentioned that, right? I remember getting that centenary top, the home one, right? And it had the kind of furry badge. The crest was furry. And my old man knew somebody that ran a sports shop, right? So he got it off his night shift from the guy that he knew. And so I had it one day before it was released. And I remember me and my brother, 11 months between us, going into school, JP, imagine this now, going into school wearing the hoops, brand new hoops, and everybody coming up because it wasn't available yet. So we got in the back door.
I wasn't allowed to wear my Celtic strip outside the house, never mind to school. I had to sneak it out if I was wearing it down to play football in the park or something like that. My mum was just like, nah, you're not. She thought that it was like a target on my head, which it kind of was in Bathgate in the 80s. Not so much now, but at the time It wasn't probably the best idea to be advertising yourself as a Celtic fan.
Like a red rag to a bull, JP. I'm looking at that jersey. I love it, and I know it was a nod to the original top back in 1888 when we played our first game. If you imagine the circumstance, imagine this scenario: somebody from Adidas gets their hands on the Celtic jersey book and is very impressed by it and thinks to themselves, wow, this guy's done a lot of research on football jerseys. And that someone is involved in the concepts of future Celtic designs. And that person was to come to the author of that book and say, right, give me an idea for an Adidas jersey for Celtic. What Adidas template would you go for? Because I'm thinking, remember the Marseille one?
It would have to be the Adidas equipment one, because I've got drawings of that, and I'll maybe dig them out for next week. But I came across.
Have I seen these drawings?
Possibly, I don't know, but I'll get them. I'll dig them out. But I used to draw concept kits, and the Adidas equipment concept kit was one that I frequently penned over and over, and I would love to see that, just because I was always so jealous of the fact that Rangers had it in the 90s. You know, they had the Adidas equipment, and I was kind of obsessed with Adidas equipment stuff. I had like the black jumper with the logo in the middle, and then it had the little the little lines right round the collar of the jumper. I had the t-shirt underneath. I had cap. Don't think I ever had the Adidas equipment trainers, but I was all about that. So that would be choice.
Totally agree with you, right? And I'm thinking of some of the classic. I mean, Marseille home and away were brilliant, right? Light blue and blue. Liverpool away with the green. So I'm thinking about the Liverpool away one, maybe a darker green, because I know that they've reintroduced the Adidas equipment template to a lot of the MLS sides. So if I'm ever asked for my opinion,
this hypothetical situation that you've described there, has that actually happened? Like, is there a book winging its way to Adidas HQ? Because
they've already got it. They've got it, and I've spoken to the guy. So I'm thinking to myself, what do we pitch for Adidas Celtic jerseys? And I love the Adidas equipment, and they have reintroduced it into the MLS. On the subject of the MLS, that is an absolutely flawless link to Georgios Giakoumakis. It looks as though his time at Celtic is going to come to an end. And the front runner for his signature, JP, is Atlanta City. What's your thoughts on that for a move for the big fella?
I mean, I don't really know the standard of the MLS. I know that it's obviously got more popular in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. There's been a lot of high-profile players have gone there at the tail end of their careers, likes of Beckham and I guess Robbie Keane as well, and there's many others that I can't actually think of off the top of my head. But it does seem a bit strange to be considering going there at this stage in his career when he's kind of sort of made a name for himself in Europe, in the sense that he finished top goal scorer in the Eredivisie and then finished top goal scorer in our league. Yeah, I just think it's maybe a bit early, but it might be the case that there's not been a lot of clubs come to the table, and those are the two prominent offers that are willing to pay him the wages that he wants and pay Celtic the fee that they want. So there does seem to be a gathering of thought that he might stay till the end of the season and assess his options then. If it was up to me, I would prefer that he stayed to the end of the season, regardless of the fact that we've got a new striker in the door. I just think it's so sort of precarious, our situation up front, that if something was to happen to Kyogo, we don't have somebody like Giakoumakis just to come in and bang in goals. We don't know anything about this guy really. The guy O, the boy O. I remember the Only an Excuse sketch. That's what I thought of when the Dennis Law boy.
Yeah, see, the thing with that is headline writers, JP, have had a field day with this fella signing. But yesterday, I don't know if you got a chance to watch Kevin, Paddy, and John yesterday. They were talking about the exact point you just made there in relation to the fact that this guy has come in. We hope that obviously he hits the ground running, to using a very overused cliche. However, because of the profile of the player, the age of the player, you get the sense that he would be, and I hate using the term, but more of a project, more of a medium term player who is going to get games, but you're not expecting him to step up. If we were faced with a scenario like we were last year when Hugo gets injured, Giakoumakis comes in and he does his bit to win us the league, doesn't he? And that's the type of striker I want. If Giakoumakis is leaving and O is the guy to replace Giakoumakis, then you want him to be able to make that impact. If he is basically going to supplement Kyogo and Giakoumakis, I'm far more confident with that. Because I think we've said all season, we needed another striker anyway, didn't we?
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, despite not knowing a lot about he's coming in, and it's the same recruitment team that are bringing him in that have brought in all the rest of the players. So it'd be quite remarkable if they'd pushed the boat out and really, tried their best to get this guy. He'd made his own kind of sacrifices or whatever to make sure that the move happened. It would be quite surprising if he was a Skepovic or a Timu Pukki or somebody that couldn't hit a barn door in a storm. Do you know, like that? That's not. I don't think that's going to be the case with this guy. But it might be the case that it might take him a while to settle in. But none of us knew who Kyogo was before he arrived, and none of us really knew about Hatate. I'd only heard of Hatate because of Liam on the Celtic Down Under podcast. He'd been talking about him, and he talked about Maeda as well. But Maeda came in with the whole, he's an established international. He was the top scorer in the J League. That lent a bit more weight to his signing. But I don't know. I'm confident this guy will do the business for us. But at the same time, I would far rather Giakoumakis hung about, because I don't think anybody can question his commitment. He showed that when he came on, and what a lot of people thought that might have been his last game, and it might still be his last game when he scored against Kilmarnock at Hampden, the semi-final. So I don't think anybody could question his commitment and desire, and the manager definitely didn't question it either. So I guess we'll wait and see, as there's only a few days left of the transfer window. So if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen imminently. And if it's America, good luck to him. I can't say living in Atlanta would be a hardship. I mean, we're just, so cold here all the time, and you think about places like Atlanta. I mean, I've been to Atlanta only for 2 days, but it's one of the hottest places I've ever been in my life. Wait a minute, is it Atlanta or Atlantic City? Did you say what is the club?
Atlanta City.
Atlanta City, right? So it is Atlanta, right? Well,
yeah.
I was there in the month of, I think it was June. I was there, and it is unbelievably hot. Like it's stifling hot. So a sharp contrast to what he's been living in Glasgow for the last 18 months or however long it is he's been here. But I mean, lifestyle, I'm sure would be great. I'm sure the money would be great. Whether or not the competitive element of the football is good, I'm sure he'll have done his homework on that and made a decision to weigh up everything versus each other, just the same as Juranovic obviously did with Union Berlin. It's quite weird this is the first time I've been on since Juranovic left, so it's quite weird seeing him already in another team's strip and setting up a goal to win away, and they've gone second now after that. They've gone second after his contribution in that game. So I mean, like I said, I'd rather he stayed to the end of the season, but I mean, it's his decision, and I'll wish him well regardless. I don't think it's quite good that there's players leaving and it's not leaving a bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't feel any animosity towards Juranovic at all, and hearing the manager's comments but hearing the manager's comments on the situation, which obviously some people have taken as like, oh well, does that mean that you want to try your hand elsewhere? I didn't see it as that. I just saw him sort of being honest about the player's situation and saying, look, he's 20, he's about to turn 28, and this is an opportunity to go to a bigger league and a more testing league, and to be able to test himself against, well, let's face facts, better quality opposition.
better quality opposition on a consistent basis. There's nobody can deny that. I mean, when you go and play in the Bundesliga, you talk about top 6 or top 8 leagues in the world, and they're there. And, you know, with regards to that comment you were talking about there that Ange made, I think eventually there will come a point where Ange is the subject of his own comment, but that time isn't now. You know, I mean, we'll get on to the usual linking and speculation and gossip regarding Ange Postecoglou inevitably moving to the EPL. That day might come, but it's not now. It's not at the end of this season. And we'll talk about that as well, JP. But it is interesting that we're talking about Giakoumakis, we're talking about Juranovic, two players who played a big part in the double. And it was, you know, a season that we continually go on about where we could not fail to win that league. There was no other option. And at the time, Ange didn't talk in that kind of tone, but he has looked back on the season by saying there was no alternative than for us to win the league. And he was right. And those two players were pivotal to that. You know, Giakoumakis came in when we really needed him because the alternative at that moment in time, as Boxing Day against St Johnstone showed, was Joey Dawson. That's all we had in our tank. Obviously, we go into the transfer market. We might have played a badder, I guess. We go into the transfer market in the January and we bring in a player in Maeda who could have fitted at centre forward. But at that time, we really needed Giakoumakis. He came in and done his job. Juranovic has done his job. And you ask yourself the question, why are we sitting here? Because I don't like quality players leaving Celtic, JP. I never like quality players leaving Celtic. But sometimes, you know, the time comes and you appreciate it. But as you say, it's almost like farewell to these two players. And I think it comes down to the culture that's been built and created by Ange Postecoglou. He's been very, very smart in the way that he delivers his message to you and I and all the other Celtic fans. He's done it in press conferences. He's set us up for this moment. And in many ways, you and I are talking about, well, let's hope he's not talking about Carter Vickers. Let's hope he's not talking about Hatate and Jota. Now, listen, he's talking about two quality players that are leaving the club, but he's almost prepared us for it. And then when the time comes, it's not a massive shock. You know, he's taken that shock factor out. He's replaced both players before both players have left because Giakoumakis is still in the building. And I just think the way we're going about it and the culture of the club, it's all down to Ange. And that's part of the tagline today, why the evolution of Ange's Celtic side will never stop. This is the way it's always going to be, isn't it, under Ange Postecoglou?
I think so, yeah. And just you mentioned culture and club. I wasn't obviously thinking about the 80s back. I was thinking about the comment that Neil Lennon made in his time when he said that the culture has to change at the club.
Yeah.
I guess that can be aimed at not just the manager, but the hierarchy and the recruitment and the backroom staff and everything like that. It permeates throughout everything that's going on at Celtic. Surely, sort of knocks into each other. It's like a domino effect. Like if one part of it is working and the next part's working, then it's going to be obvious if there's one part of that isn't working. Mm-hmm. And I think that everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet, which is another overused cliche, but it's very true because you're not going to get success unless everybody's doing that. And like you said, the way that Ange Postecoglou from day one has spoken in his press conferences, it's always been very clear. He doesn't mess around. He doesn't suffer fools. He doesn't suffer idiotic questions from journalists or so-called journalists. He just tells it like it is, and that's all we can really ask for as paying punters who dedicate our parts of our lives to Celtic.
Huge part. And, you know, you look at even just the departures this season, if we take in the pre-season as well, JP, players like Nir Biton and Tom Rogic, you know, guys that had the best part of 20 years between them, service to Celtic Football Club. And, you know, I think there was a ruthlessness in many ways about those two moves where Ange thought, well, it's time for you guys to go. Juranovic and Giakoumakis, slightly different scenarios, but at the same time, Julien, you know, the time is up. He's made his mind up. Ange, he's made his mind up, and he will inevitably make sure that you're not at the football club. The next in line, I guess, will be Giakoumakis, but of course, we've also got Maurice Jenz and his Instagram post would confirm, and it's been widely reported that he is going to end up at Schalke, and that's on the back of Celtic and Lorient coming to an agreement to tear up the loan deal to allow him, I guess, game time. So it goes back to, again, these comments that Ange makes in the press conferences. Sometimes you get stock answers from gaffers, don't you? But, Ange doesn't waste a word. I mean, he's already spoken about you're not guaranteed game time at a club like Celtic. So if you're Moritz Jenz and his club are saying to you, are you going to play this player in the second half of the season? Well, Ange's response to that is there's no guarantees, And I think that has resulted in Giakoumakis to a degree. He wants more game time, understandably. His international managers come out and spoke about, decisions and playing and all that kind of stuff. So it's on his mind. It will be on Jens's mind as well as his parent club. And, Ange Postecoglou is quite happy to say, well, let's let him go. And it's a player in Moritz Jenz that, interesting enough, just before we came on, I said to you, I was having a look at, his stats this season. He started and played every Champions League game this season because of Carter Vickers. 6 Champions League games, full games under his belt. And, he was used for that purpose. As bad and as brutal and as ruthless as this sounds, we needed him for that purpose, but Ange doesn't need him now, so he's quite happy to move him on. And there is a ruthlessness to that, JP, but it's one that I think we need at times.
Definitely. I remember thinking that Jenz played pretty well in the home game against Real Madrid. I thought, again, it's not something I've watched back. There's not enough hours in the day to watch entire Celtic matches back. But yeah, I do remember him playing well in that game and thinking, he's decent. He can compete at this level, which is the highest level going. But there was something about some of his other performances that just made me think that we weren't going to pick up the option to buy him at the end of the season. I didn't think he would leave in January, but I genuinely, I think I said before on here when you asked me about it, or somebody asked me about it, or whether it was a comment, I just didn't think that Jenz was going to be kept long term. I didn't see him as being as good as Starfelt or Carter Vickers to become like a mainstay first pick centre half for Celtic. I would definitely still subscribe to that theory that he's not as good as either of them, and in fact quite a long way off as good as them in terms of what he would be like on a consistent basis, because their consistency has been incredible as all the stats guys and analysts would pull up and be like, well, here's what's happened when Starfelt and Carter Vickers have played together. So common sense would tell you that anybody's going to have a hard time getting in the way of that partnership, unless, of course, one of them leaves, which I really don't want to see that happening anytime soon. But we just don't know what's going to happen. I think, like you said, he's prepared us for departures, and we'd be foolish to not prepare ourselves for further departures in the summer because, like you said, he's ruthless, and if somebody expresses a desire to play elsewhere, he's probably going to say yes. He's not going to argue with them, is he? He didn't stand in the way of Juranovic. He's not standing in the way of Giakoumakis, as far as we know. So, yeah, I think we have to probably ready ourselves for a bit of change in the summer. But the one thing that you can be confident about is that at least we're on the right path in terms of recruitment and identifying the right players to come in. And like I said before earlier, I can't see how we suddenly have like this successful recruitment policy that just goes haywire at some point and we make so many wrong decisions. I see it playing out in the same way that it's played out so far, in that we're bringing in the right people, the right characters, the right players.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you're talking about identifying the players. I've criticised a few times since the arrivals of our Japanese players under Ange Postecoglou the fact that we didn't tap into that market. And here's the caveat. I understand that we signed Nakamura from an Italian club, but I'm talking about Japanese talent that we knew about because we had a player for 4 years at the club in Shansuke Nakamura. And after that, and again, I realised we had Koko Mizuno as well, but he was nothing more than a footnote in Celtic's history, if that. But we knew the talent was in Japanese football, JP, and we didn't pursue it, and that's 2009 Nakamura left Celtic. And I've said to Liam, I want Liam to actually fill us in on the type of players we could have probably got in that time period. And, you'd be tearing your hair out, I think, at some of the successes that came out of the Japanese league back then, right up to the arrival of Kyogo. I'm keen to get everybody's views on the discussion points that JP and I are covering today. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you, JP, that jersey over your shoulder, when you look at it, I was asked a question yesterday, how football tops make you visualise moments or players. It's a bit like you could be walking down the street and you hear a song coming out of somebody's car through the window or whatever, and it propels you back to a moment in your life. It reminds you of things. And I think smells do that as well. And because I'm a geek, football jerseys also do that to me. Which player does that remind you of, JP?
Weirdly, and I guess controversially, given his opinions this week, Chris Commons. Chris Commons. It's probably because of the advert for the strip as well. If you remember the advert, I'm sure it was
that's right.
Chris Commons, Gary Hooper, and maybe it was either Stokes or Samaras. There was the three of them that were standing in like a changing room, and they've all got that full kit on with the black shorts. Because the black shorts didn't have the Celtic badge on them; they just had a Nike tick and a Tenants logo, a black Tenants logo, so you couldn't really see anything on the shorts. And then I think it was black socks with a green trim.
It was black and green hoops.
Black and green hoops, that's right.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it was similar. As I say, similar. It was a nod back to, a homage to the very first kit. Bizarrely enough, doing the research, just as I digress a wee bit, there's a belief that the first kits may have been supplied by Willie Maley, believe it or not, because he had an upholsterers and he had a shop in Glasgow. So you could imagine anyone involved with a football club at that moment in time, we need a set of kits. Where do we get them from? And he wrote about it in his book, if anybody can get their hands on Willie Maley's book. And he said that they actually got two different kits. And I couldn't for the life of me find out, what did that other kit look like, JP? That would be interesting. What did the second kit look like? Because nobody's ever seen it.
Imagine if it was blue.
Oh, come on. That we had to wait to the 90s for that. And what about this jersey behind me? Tell me a player that reminds you of.
I had that top as well, and I foolishly gave it away. That reminds me of Peter Grant, Paul McStay, that kind of period. Really, that was like, it was 94, 95, or 95, 96.
Well, it was both actually, because we first wore it in the Scottish Cup final at the end of 94, 95, and then we wore it the following season as well. So even the likes of Van Hooijdonk, Tom, Cadet, Di Canio, they all wore that. But when I see it, I do think of McStay, because that cup final, Airdrie, rotten game, but it's always in my top 3 Celtic games because of the importance of it, winning the Scottish Cup in 95. But I'm going to get some of the comments coming up. We've got Paddy Lavery. It was great to meet Paddy last Friday at Gracie's, where we had an audience with the one and only Brian McClare, JP. He is unique in terms of an ex-footballer. He's hilarious.
What records did he bring?
Oh, that's a good question, right? So I asked him to bring 3. The first one was, tell me a song or bring me a record that reminds you of Manchester, right? And the song he brought was James, Sit Down.
Nice.
I thought, lovely.
Cool.
And obviously, there's a bit of a link there because he played with Gordon Strachan, who became best mates with Tim Booth.
He's a massive fan. I've seen him a bit. I go to see James nearly every time they play, and I've seen Gordon Strachan twice at James gigs, just giving him a kind of, right?
That's brilliant. That's superb. The song that reminded him of Glasgow was the Jesus and Mary chain. The guy's just brilliant. Just Like Honey.
Aye.
Right?
Class. So
he played that. And then the other song was the song that he's listening to right now was Cod Liver Oil and the Orange Juice.
By Hamish Imlach. Yeah, that's a great song.
Imlach. However, it was a more recent version of that tune. Right. But I'll tell you, of the 3, the one song that the crowd sang along to was Cod Liver Oil. That was the one everybody was toe tapping along to.
I was at the wedding that I was at in Seville. My mate Dave's brother recited the whole of that song when we were at the bar. Yeah, he just held court with quite a large part of the wedding party, and he sang that song. But the first person I heard to sing that song and who introduced it to me was King Creosote. You know, the fight. I saw him play live in Edinburgh one night, and he covered that song, and that's the first time that I'd heard it. So,
superb. It reminds me of my old granny, so it was great to hear it. It was a brilliant night, by the way. I'm sure little anecdotes will drop into future episodes of this. But I want to say, last word on kits, I absolutely promise. If you show us the picture of the kit you designed, JP, I'll show you the picture of the kit I designed, probably at about the same time. Right, and I'll bring them up on the screen.
Yeah.
Once a geek, always a geek, as they say. And we'll get on to Juranovic. Once a Celt, always a Celt. I thought it was a nice message that he sent out as well. Kinky Cadet, good window, but we still need to move on. At least 7 players. Let's read through the list then. Giakoumakis, McCarthy, Turnbull, Bain, Gucci, Jenz, Abelgar. Right, I was going to say to you, JP, is there anybody you disagree with? But Turnbull is the guy. Let's talk about Turnbull then, right? Last 3 games, he has been involved in creating or scoring a goal in each of the 3 games. He comes on against Kilmarnock. It's his shot that's saved that Giakoumakis puts away. And then he scores against St Mirren and he scores against Morton. We mentioned the fact that he didn't really celebrate his first of those 2 goals. And the question is, where is he? Where does he fit in this squad?
I'd say he's not a starter as we currently stand, but I think he's definitely still in the manager's thinking. I don't think he's done anything that I've seen to warrant being on that list. I think for some reason he's become an unfancied player. I think it's because of the success of the current midfield that he's just kind of maybe surplus to requirements in some people's minds, not a lot of people's minds, but in some people's minds. But certainly not mine. I wouldn't want to see Turnbull go purely for the fact that he's Scottish, he's an international. I don't think he's fulfilled his potential at the club yet. I think there's a lot that he could still do. I'd like to think that we could get the best out of him, the best years of his career could and should be at Celtic, because we're seeing a guy in John McGinn. I know they're different type of players and all the rest of it, but John McGinn's gone down to England, and England are getting the best years out of John McGinn's career. And I wouldn't like to think that Turnbull would go somewhere else and thrive and shine, because he would invariably would. I don't think Turnbull would go to a sort of lowly club. I think he would get a decent move that could then earn him a bigger move, at a la Southampton, to then move up to a bigger club. So no, definitely not him on that list. McCarthy is that's an obvious one just because of his lack of game time. I mean, it's not worked. We spoke about that when he signed. I said, ask me in 18 months. We're 18 months down the line. McCarthy hasn't played anywhere near enough football at Celtic to warrant him being considered to be kept on, really. Like you said last week, I don't care how good he is in the dressing room. I think it's a likely high wage, and it would just make sense for him to get a move and go and play football somewhere else, because he's a million miles away from that Celtic midfield. If Turnbull's not getting a game, then McCarthy's
exactly
not getting a game. Bain, obviously, he's been about for a while. He's kind of a little bit tainted in some people's eyes in the fact that he was there during that horrible season in 2021. Idaguchi, it's just not worked. Jenz is away, and Abelgard is, so far out the picture now. He's not been in any squads as far as I know. I can't remember seeing him on the bench, and he's certainly not had any game time. So it's probably going to be the end for him as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I look at Turnbull and I think that Matt O'Reilly, Aaron Moy are fighting it out for one position.
Yeah.
And what we've probably discovered is there's no certainties with this team, JP, because if you had asked me 2 months ago if Matt O'Reilly was going to drop out the side, I'd have said, no, you're off your head. It's not going to happen. but he has. And what's then happened is Moy has absolutely grabbed that opportunity to make himself undroppable. You know, if there is such a thing in an Ange team, and that's just down to the standards and the level of your performance. So Moy's got the jersey and he's not giving it up.
Mm-hmm.
When his performances dip, when he is suspended, when he's injured, then who do you pick? And that is then the question. And if Turnbull then gets that look in and gets that sniff at a first-team jersey, he needs to make the impact that Moyes made. He needs to make the impact that O'Reilly made when he came in, you know, last January. So I don't see him as... I would be really disappointed if we lost David Turnbull. I believe what you say in relation to the best is yet to come with Turnbull. It's sometimes with players like him, you forget just how young they are because they've been in and around like the Motherwell team since he was like 17, 18. We signed him when he's 20. And you sometimes forget this guy's the same age as Stephen Welsh, you know, and there's loads more to come from David Turnbull. I would not be looking to move him on. I guess the big challenge is keeping him happy because he'll be wanting to play a lot of football. But again, I'll go back to what Ange said. No one's guaranteed football in this team. And I totally believe that. Jenz, he's on his way. Abelgar, I think maybe, again, anyone in the comments section who knows any more about this than me, please educate me on it. But Abelgar's here, and the way that he's here was slightly different from us just going to Ruben Kazan and saying, can we loan your player? It was down to the fact that there was a special dispensation on the contracts of players to play their football elsewhere. How does that affect what we've just done with Jenz? Can you tear up that contract and he goes somewhere else? I'm not quite sure. You know, who's holding the registration of the player? Well, Celtic are, but we don't own them. So,
and what I said earlier on about how good the recruitment's been, obviously when you stack it up against Abelgard, it doesn't look too clever, but it's a loan move. It was pretty low risk in terms of the output. It's not like in a Yeti where we spent $5 million on the guy and
he's still to come back.
I know. I don't know. I've not kept an eye on. I know he started all right in Switzerland, but I don't know how it's gone since then. I'm kind of scared to look to see if he has just dropped off the face of the earth over there as well. Because I mean, if you can't do it in your homeland at this point in your career, when are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? So the Abelgard thing, I really don't know the ins and outs of that, but he's clearly out of the picture. But you mentioned Welsh there. Maybe Jenz will postpone the departure of Welsh until the summer, possibly, because Welsh will be closer to the first team and getting opportunities than. But then you've got Kobayashi as well, who's come in. So. But that would be 4, wouldn't it? There wouldn't be 5. It would be Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Kobayashi, and Welsh. So that's kind of a decent figure. But because we've not heard any chat about anybody coming in for Welsh, well, nothing concrete. Fabrizio Romano hasn't been tweeting about Stephen Welsh. So I don't know.
Has he been tweeting about Porteous? Because people can't seem to pronounce Porteous.
Well, they can't say Giacomakis either. So many people call Giacomakis Geomakis. It's so frustrating when you hear that.
Awesome.
But I don't know. I've not heard anything about Welsh going either on loan or otherwise. Lots of people think that we should offer some sort of deal for Nisbet and throw Welsh in on that deal, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, there's a few people commenting on that very player in the comment section. I'm going to bring it up. But the other one that kind of springs to my mind, because I don't disagree with McCarthy or Gucci, Jenz, Abelgar. We know Giacomakis is on his way. But I'm going to be looking at Bain and saying, by the way, whatever you think of him, he's going nowhere because we've just loaned out Toby Obieleme. He's away over to Ireland. So we're not going to run with 2 goalies. So I don't know, is Hazard back in the building? Obviously, he's another goalkeeper that was out on loan.
Yeah, he's a season-long loan, wasn't he, at Helsinki?
Obieleme. I used to be able to pronounce that.
No, Hazard's on a season-long loan.
So he's still on loan?
I think so.
Yeah, so I don't see Bain going anywhere, but I wouldn't keep him because he's good in the dressing room, as I've heard other people commenting on. Another wee player that is playing his football in MLS that came to my mind was Patrick Klamala. Remember,
Right.
Klamala moved on. He's now at New York Red Bulls.
Not
And his
good.
goal scoring record, JP, 14 goals in 63 appearances. So he's only 24 years of age. Albion Ayeti at Sturm Graz has scored 3 goals in 16 games. So he's probably going to be coming back. And another player that went over to the MLS, you mentioned Beckham, Robbie Keane, but another player that went over, Pirlo.
Oh, yeah.
He went over to New York City. And I think, was he either photographed in the parlour or with Celtic fans over there? I'm sure he was at an event and Celtic scarves ended up either round his neck or behind him or something like that.
I've not seen that picture, but what an amazing player he was.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
Now,
let's have a look at some of the comments on Nisbet then, because Nisbet did make it into the tagline of a previous Acsom bulletin based on the fact that we do have to have a quota of homegrown players. So if you are looking to move on players like Welsh or Bain, for example, then your quota is coming down. They need to be replaced. Even McCarthy is classed as a homegrown player, having come through the ranks at Hamilton. Afternoon to all our regulars. It's always great to see you on the comments section. Now, Paul, gone wrong. We should be matching Millwall's bid, thinks Paul, and bring Nisbet in as backup. Good value at £2 million with a proven record. It looks as though that deal's going to go through. I think it's £2.5 million with add-ons, JP. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting that that's the level of club that are going to potentially prize Nisbet away from Hibs. It's hardly a kind of who's who of English clubs that are all at the table. Which obviously, I mean, what age is he?
25.
25. I don't think that's a bad age to sign a Scottish player, but it just the consensus seems to be that Hibs wouldn't do a deal with us. They wouldn't entertain selling him to us. It would, in the same way that the McGinn thing didn't happen, but the McGinn thing didn't happen because Aston Villa came in and they offered them more money, as far as I know. Like he got offered a better salary and there was I think a bonus worked into it if they got qualification from the Championship into the Premier League, which they did. And all the players all received substantial remuneration for their efforts in getting Aston Villa back to the Premier League. So, it's a weird one that I don't really know much about Millwall's current state. I know that they're not the most pleasant of football clubs to support if you were of sane mind and you were in the Millwall end in an away game. I don't think it would perhaps enlighten you too much, but maybe for the wrong reasons. But maybe they've rid themselves of that element. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, so apologies to any Millwall people with Millwall leniencies. But I don't know what their current footballing predicament is, where they are in the league or anything like that. But I would have thought that somebody were maybe because of he's just back from an injury that there's not a lengthy list of suitors for him, because everyone's just kind of going on his current form, which is great. Don't get me wrong, his goal score, his numbers of late have been really good. But I can't remember what it was like before that injury. Like, was he as prolific as this?
There was a spell. You know my concern about him, JP, right, is I remember him at Wraith Rovers in Dunfermline, and when he wanted a move, it was obvious because his form disappeared. And I think there was an element of that. There was some personal issues he was going through as well. And then the injury happened. And only since he came back, because his form was away with it by the time we played them in the final. And I think obviously 3 managers in the best 2 years maybe probably doesn't help either. So should we match the bid for Nisbet at this moment in time? You know, I don't think he's a bad player, but I think there's still a lot of development left in Nisbet. And I've said that before. £2.5 million. If Celtic could get a player, a Scottish talent at 25 for £2.5 million, should he be the kind of level that we're going for? Well, people might argue.
It's similar to the Lyndon Dykes thing, doesn't it? Remember when Dykes was leaving Livingston, everyone was saying, "Oh, we should sign Dykes." I mean, has Lyndon Dykes really tore it up down there for QPR? I don't know. I don't think so. It's certainly not been on my radar that he's doing remarkably well for QPR. Obviously, he had a short-lived career underneath Mick Beale. I don't know.
That's right. And then he had some kind of social media cryptic message on Beale's departure, didn't he? About what was it now? It was something to do with a rat, maybe something like that. There was definitely something on Instagram. I don't do Instagram yet, but I have seen the screenshots. But Lyndon Dykes is a player, I think, what he has done, and again, this isn't me saying we should have signed him, because I don't think we should have. He's now Scotland's first pick striker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that says as much about the way that Steve Clarke manages Scotland as anything else, but he is. So in that respect, he would never have been Scotland's first pick striker at Livingston. Mm-hmm. He's gone down there, done a job, scored goals, not as prolific as maybe he was up here. But Nisbet, you know, if he goes down to Millwall, we'll need to wait and see. One thing that always strikes me about Millwall, as well as the players that played for Celtic in Millwall, like Paul Hartley, Mick McCarthy and Tony Cascarino, is that they have a strange association with Wraith Rovers fans. So these fans that you're talking about with a Millwall state of mind, they hook up with Wraith Rovers every time Wraith Rovers play Hearts, because there's beef between Millwall and Hearts. So They come up and a posse comes up to make sure Wraith Rovers are well represented should anything kick off. There you go. A wee bit of specialist knowledge about Fife there for you, JP.
I think there is such a thing as a Millwall state of mind.
I know what it would be described as, to be fair. Thurban Culture, has anybody left? Is any departures? Well, we are basically waiting for the unveiling, I guess, of Maurice Jenz at Schalke. He'll be out the door, and JP brought up the tagline, where does it leave Welsh? I think that had Jenz remained at the club, Welsh would have left in one way or another, be that by loan or transfer. But what I did hear, JP, and this surprised me a wee bit, is you're talking about throwing in Welsh as part of the Nisbet deal. Celtic want £3 million plus for Stephen Welsh.
Which is more than Nisbet's going for.
Yeah. So
I don't see why that shouldn't be the case. I mean, Stephen Welsh is a decent player. I don't think he's far from the finished article. Of course he's not, but I think he's got the potential to go somewhere, potentially abroad, and do pretty well. You know, Josh Doig's now getting talked about for $9 million. I saw that this morning. Mm-hmm. $9 million fee for Josh Doig, and I remember you kind of sort of said we should maybe be looking at Josh Doig when he was at Hibs, and then he goes over there and makes a name for himself there. So it would be ridiculous if Stephen Welsh wasn't going for something like $3 million. I mean, what's the alternative? What, $1 million? What, $1 million?
I know.
8 figures, $1 million. I just don't see how that could possibly. It'd be insulting to the club and to the player if he was getting talked about in terms of £1 million. $3 million, I think that's a fairly good starting point for Stephen Welsh.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think he will leave, because, as you quite rightly said, you can't run with just three centre halves. Some people in the comments might come in and say, well, we've also got Boss and Lawwell. And I think that was fresh in the gaffer's mind by playing him against Morton, making his debut. But again, you're going into, let's say, the final derby of the season, and you've got an injury crisis. Are you happy throwing in Lawwell at that stage? That's the way I think. Yeah, there's games and there's time to bleed players in, JP, but I want Welsh. He's been through that ringer. More than once. He's played Champions League football. He's ahead of the game in terms of his development as a footballer, and I think that it would be handy to keep him around. I don't think the Jenz thing was part of the plan, but through the agent and maybe his own parent club, I'm not going to say they've been demanding first team football, but they've obviously made their feelings known, and Ange has just done the deal. I think that completely changes everything for Welsh, and it wouldn't surprise me if he remained until at least the end of the season. Now, Stephen comes in. Welcome to the show, Stephen, and you are watching on YouTube. We can't lose 3 homegrown players without replacing, as it seems, going into Europe. It means, rather, going into Europe, 3 fewer foreign players too. The thing with that is every pre-season, you do have academy graduates So you do have the option of having academy graduates on that massive subs bench in the Champions League. And that's why when the very first, if you were to look at the very first European squad that Ange submitted, JP, there were players in that squad who were probably not even playing for the B team. And they were sitting on the bench for games, and you had to check out who they were. Such was their age and their inexperience. So yeah, I totally get the rule, but there's other ways around that rule as well. Because there's going to be games where you have a homegrown player on the bench who's not actually going to get a game, but you're just fulfilling that particular homegrown player rule as well. But again, I think that's a reason for keeping Welsh, a reason for keeping David Turnbull as well. Gary Madden, absolutely love that top JP has behind him. You have got quite a healthy collection of Celtic jerseys, JP, it's got to be said. Are you almost nearing? You've got a few more?
No, I've not bought that many recently, but it could be better if I hadn't been so generous and given them away when I was a wee guy. I gave away my People's home top. I gave away that one behind you. A couple of away tops have mysteriously disappeared over the years. But I do look after them. I kind of treat them like they're, I don't know, treat them like they're expensive stuff. And I suppose, in actual fact, some of them are. Like, you see the price that they go for at these classic football shirts, sort of pop-ups and things like that, and they're wanting like 150 quid for a football top.
I know.
It's quite bizarre, but yeah, they just. I like football tops in general, and I've got quite a lot of non-Celtic football tops as well. I'm after one of those Red Star, the Paris. You've seen that club in Paris, Red Star FC?
They're the kind of left wing state of mind club, yeah.
Their tops are minted. They brought out like an anniversary one, which is, I mean, that's the one I want to get. I'll need to show you I'll put it on the Twitter post of the one that I'm after, because it's an absolute belter. I don't think it's available at the moment. Whether or not they redo it or repress it, I don't know, but I'm sure they could make a lot of money if they did.
The one I wanted was Oppa Celtic, the tie-in with Primal Scream. I thought that looked.
You don't get one?
Oh, I think they were sold out before they were even available. And it would be good, the picture of Cantona wearing it. It looked absolutely stunning. Now, we've got Jog VY or Jogvi, and he is being made homesick because of your earlier discussion in relation to the gig that you're doing with the Twilight Sad. Hello from London, and hello to you. Anyone who's actually tuning in and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then I would suggest that you do that, because 2023, it's all about Acsom. It's all about exclusive Celtic content. We have been speaking about some players who might be going, some players who have arrived as well, and was on the top of the show as well. 21 years of age. It's a deal worth £2.5 million. Centre forward. He's got 93 appearances under his belt, 23 goals. And I look at a player like that. Now, he's coming from the K-League, and I'm looking at his age, and I look at the way that Celtic bring through our youth players, our young players, JP, and he's got almost 100 appearances at the age of 21. And, it gets to that stage where you'll just never know if our current 21-year-olds are good enough, because there's no way to play 100 games at that age.
No, that's also including, he's also done in that time period, he's also done his national service, because he chose to do it. He chose to do it, I think, in 2020. So obviously picked a good year to do it. I don't know if that was before or during the pandemic that he made that decision, but he must have planned for it. And then, I guess, getting out of the way while there's no football being played, or while the football had stopped. Presumably it stopped over there, or if it was getting played behind closed doors, I don't know when they resumed. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously, like you said, to come with that level of experience already at 21, there's not many players of that age that have played that amount of games at a decent level, because of the lack of opportunities to do so. Like, there's no reserve leagues. You're only going to have been playing that level of games if you've been out on loan somewhere at a young age and played a full season with somebody. So I wonder if he'll be included in the squad on Sunday. I mean, would he be considered ready? I don't know how recently he's been playing. in South Korea. My friend who I was with yesterday actually lived there and went to see that team that he played for when he lived in South Korea. Like it was a good few years ago, so it was obviously before his time. But he said, "Oh, you've signed a player from my team," and I went, "What are you talking about?" You know, when I lived in South Korea, that's who I went to see. So he's been to that ground and used to go semi-regularly. He's got a scarf and a strip and all that. So is it the Blue Wings?
Blue Wings, yeah, aye. And it would be good if he was able to be involved on the weekend. We're going to be talking about that game, JP. I always like looking at these young players. It just makes me feel so much older than I already am, because when he was born, when O was born, number 5 in the UK charts was Gorillas with Clint Eastwood. I remember that being released like it was just a few years ago. And now we've got strikers who were born on that day. And the closest game to O's birth was a very special game in relation to Martin O'Neill's first season, in that on the 7th of April that year, we beat St Mirren 1-0 to wrap up the league championship, the goal being scored by Tommy Johnson.
I think that if you hadn't said it, I remember that, because he did that when he scored.
Yeah, he did. And you know the thing about that's the treble winning season, obviously, Martin O'Neill's first season in charge. And you think to yourself, wow, that was when this player was born. And it does make you feel particularly old, JP. However, I'm looking forward to seeing him. I've done everything else that, you know, Celtic fans have done across the globe, and you've tried to get as much footage as possible. You've looked at the stats, but until you actually see him in the flesh, you can't really make your mind up. I don't think the guys were being negative yesterday when they were talking about him being more of a project signing, but that goes back to the discussion you and I had about Giakoumakis, in that I would have much rather have kept Giakoumakis if at all possible. Very quickly then, we'll talk about Dundee United. A couple of ex-Celts have been in the news because Jimmy Goodwin, I call him Jimmy Goodwin as if he's a lead singer of Doves. Jim Goodwin, sorry, ex-Celt. Sugarly Peg, potentially the worst result in Scottish football history, if you look at the gap between the two teams. Liam Scales was part of that defeat. Lennon and Paul Lambert have been touted to replace him. I mean, that was a shocker, wasn't it? I mean, we've had a few bad results in our time over the years, JP, but nothing as bad as that.
I watched it with an Aberdeen fan who, James, was not happy chappy on
I bet.
Monday night. No, I mean, he just, as the second half ticked on, I just kept looking over at him, and his expression was just sort of genuinely in shock. He was like, this can't be happening. And I was trying to imagine how he must have felt in that scenario, because I mean, that it's worse than Cali Thistle. It's worse than a lot of things that have happened. I mean, there's no way in the world that should have happened. And the amount of people that made money off that, it's the screenshots that I saw on Twitter of people putting 20 quid on and 50 quid. I'm pretty sure I saw 100 on it as well. It's a lot of money, and the thing is, people were that sure that it was a possibility, and I genuinely didn't think. I was like, nah, no way are they going to get beat off. I know, what are they non-league? I mean, what?
Well, there's 6th tier. There's 6th tier, so they're part of the pyramid. But I mean, that gap, JP, should not happen. Yeah. I mean, you're talking the kind of level of like Haddington Athletic, Musselburgh. That's the level that you're talking to now. And I know there's a bit of back in there. I know that they've got quite a few players that have played higher division football in Scotland, but that should not be possible on paper.
You see the manager's team talk before it as well. Like, we watched the team talk in the dressing room, and I said to James, I was like, imagine like after that team talk, they go out and get horsed like 5, 6, 7-0, and then that's not what happened.
It was brilliant.
The reverse of that happened. They got an early goal, and somebody on Super Scoreboard, I listened back to Super Scoreboard the next day, and somebody actually said, it was a Darvel fan, and he actually said Truesdale's the one to watch out for. And the amount of times that James and I said, that's Truesdale again. He played really, really well. And then the Darvel fan said, if we get an early goal, we'll have something to hold on to, and we're a good enough football team. We're not just going to hoof it up the park, all the time. We've actually got a decent enough football team to play away to a victory, and it's exactly what happened. And fair play to them.
Yeah, for sure.
But Falkirk at the next round, so I wouldn't like to be Falkirk going there unless you're totally on it.
Absolutely. Anything's possible now. And, you know, I mentioned some of the guys that have been touted for the job. Jim Goodwin's still in a job, JP, but one name. By the way, you talked about the pre-match team talk. What about the post-match interview by Amy Canavan? It was Amy from Acsom fame who has gone on to...
By the way, that's like that's going to be played over and over and over and over again for the rest of the time, and she was there reporting on that night, you know, so it's kind of iconic, really, that it's somebody that you know that was doing the pre-match and post-match and everything else. So, but Tannadice on Sunday, it's not going to be 9-0, is it? It's going to be, I think it'll be tighter. I don't think. Well, they'll surely want to exact some sort of revenge if they can, or they'll certainly not want to be opened up in the way that they were that day. So I think it'll be a tough game, but hopefully we've got the minerals to come out of it with 3 points.
Just very quickly before you go, JP, do you start Turnbull against Dundee United?
No. It would be Moy or O'Reilly in my team with Hatate or McGregor. I wouldn't be against him starting if I saw his name in the starting lineup. I wouldn't be aghast or anything like that. I would be okay with it, but I can't see how he's getting in ahead of Moy or O'Reilly. I don't see that happening. I mean, I know that he's obviously impressed in his recent performances, but does that warrant getting bumped out? One of them getting bumped out of the side? I think it's more likely that Moy will start.
I'd go for Moy. I definitely would go for Moy. Robert, one of these days, Amy is always welcome back on Acsom, and one of these days you might see her back on these screens. Now, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Give us a thumbs up on the YouTube video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to come and see us live. It was a great laugh last Friday. We're doing another one with Tom Boyd in February, and there are some tickets available for Danny, but not many. Danny McGrain in March. Ticket underneath the video. All that's left for me to say once again, JP, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.